Photon Strike Bounzer is a fantastic rank 6 monster that saw tons of competitive play. For a long time, this was one of the best rank 6 monsters that you could make when you were going first and trying to establish your board. But what if I told you this card was part of a forgotten archetype? And I'm not talking about photons, I'm talking about Bounzers. So yes, there is a Bounzer archetype, and I think a lot of people don't remember them at all. Last week I made a video on Crash Bugs, another forgotten archetype, and I wanted to make another installment to the series. In today's video we're talking about the Bounzer cards, a set of cards that really didn't see any competitive play outside of Photon Strike Bounzer. Now some people might say maybe I'm breaking the rules a little bit here because I'm actually including a card that did see a lot of play that people probably do know about, but I think the archetype as a whole has been completely forgotten, so I think it still meets the requirements for this series. Please let me know in the comment section below if you guys have ever heard of the Bounzer archetype outside of Photon Strike Bounzer, and if so, please let me know when the last time you thought about this deck was. I suppose I should cover Photon Strike Bounzer. I don't think this card is forgotten, but it is a very good starting point because this is what the deck is trying to summon. Photon Strike Bounzer is a warrior light monster with 2700 attack points and 2000 defense. It is a generic rank 6, it takes 2 level 6 monsters, and it says once per turn during either player's turn when a monster effect is activated on your opponent's side of the field, you can attach 1 Xyz material from this card, negate the effect, and if you do, inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. As I already mentioned, this card saw tons of competitive play and it's not a really big surprise. It has good stats, it's easy to make, it has a really good effect, and even nowadays if you were to build a deck with lots of level 6 monsters, you probably would consider putting this card in your extra deck, even if it has sort of been power crept by other effect negation that you see in modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks. Now if you only know about Photon Strike Bounzer, you might be thinking that, okay, the rest of the Bouncers are going to be easy to summon level 6 monsters to make this boss monster, and that's not that bad, right? Well, it gets a lot worse after this card. Hammer Bouncer is the super rare in the archetype. This is the only holographic card besides Photon Strike Bouncer, and it is a level 6 warrior earth monster with 2300 attack points and 2000 defense. It says if your opponent controls a card and you control no cards, you can normal summon this card without tributing. If this card attacks an opponent's monster, as long as you control no spell or trap cards, your opponent cannot activate any spell or trap cards until the end of the damage step. Now for context here, these cards were released in Galactic Overlord, which was released back in 2012, which means that at the time of these cards being introduced into the TCG, we had decks like Dino Rabbit and Windups and Inzectors all pretty much at full power. Already these cards have an uphill battle. Obviously Hammer Bouncer is not on the same power level as anything in those 3 decks. But what really made it difficult to be excited for the Bouncer cards was that in Galactic Overlord we got a new archetype alongside the Bouncers. Heretics were a very big, very hyped up new theme with this set, and yeah, just like the Bouncer cards, they were trying to summon rank 6 monsters, which means that the Bouncers are not only competing against already existing meta decks, but they're also competing against another archetype in their very set that is also trying to accomplish the exact same end goal, and they could do it a lot better than the Bouncer cards. Now I'm not saying this card is completely trash. I mean, when Gokis are able to normal summon Goki Rescorpio without tributing, that's pretty cool because it leads into bigger combos. And if this was like the worst card in the deck, you know, maybe it would be okay. Maybe it's like the one normal summon you play and then the rest of the cards can special summon themselves to set up these big combos. But this is the best main deck monster in the archetype, and in that role it is simply not good enough. The next card and the only other level 6 Bouncer monster is Phantom Bouncer, and this is a dark warrior with 2400 attack points and 1200 defense. It says if this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can add 2 Bouncer cards from your deck to your hand. Yes, this is really the only other level 6 Bouncer monster, and no, it does not have a summoning effect. It only adds cards from your deck to your hand, which is fine, but the trigger is so awkward because it's on a level 6 monster with no easy way to bring it out on the field. This card is not very good, and it's the only other level 6 monster in this archetype that is trying to make a rank 6 boss monster. This is once again a case where if this was the worst card in the archetype and the rest of the cards were good, maybe it would be okay, but because this is not the worst card in the deck, this is actually one of the okay-ish ones, it means that the deck is going to be pretty underpowered. Blade Bouncer is the final monster in the archetype. This is a level 4 warrior earth monster with 1800 attack points and 1400 defense, and it says once per turn, if this card attacks and your opponent controls a monster at the end of the damage step, you can discard one card. This card can attack an opponent's monster once again during this battle phase. What the actual hell is this card? What does this have to do with anything in the archetype? It's not level 6, it does not help you summon level 6 monsters, and the effect is completely useless in pretty much every single situation, especially by 2012 standards. This thing makes no sense, and it even makes no sense to the point where you probably wouldn't even play this card in a Bouncer deck, and then you're left with like the other two garbage level 6 monsters to hopefully try to eventually summon your rank 6 boss monster. I want to make it clear here that there are no level modulation effects in this deck. Blade Bouncer truly has no synergy with any of these cards. The final card in today's video is Bouncer Guard, a normal trap that simply says target one face-up Bouncer monster you control. This turn it cannot be targeted by other card effects or be destroyed by battle. This turn, if an opponent's monster attacks, it must target that monster for an attack if it is still on the field. This card is straight garbage once again. Maybe there's a debate about whether or not this is worse or better than Blade Bouncer. Personally, I think it's even more useless. You wouldn't really want to play either one of these cards in a Bouncer deck, and then you only have 6 cards, so it's really not a Bouncer deck anymore. But yeah, Bouncer Guard is really, really bad. It's way too slow as a trap card. Maybe it would be cool like as a quick play spell or something along those lines, but as a trap in a deck that's already very, very slow, Bouncer Guard is completely useless. So you have an archetype here that has a very strong boss monster that's seen play in tons of decks because it's generically summonable, and then you have a whole bunch of trash. And this really is not similar to like Mecha Phantom Beast Dracosac, which did see more play than the rest of the archetype. There are plenty of other great Mecha Phantom Beast cards. The deck itself was okay-ish in different formats. This deck though has a really great boss monster, and the rest of the cards are completely useless in pretty much every single situation. I remember back in the day people kind of jokingly talking about summoning Hammer Bouncer to crash with a Dolka, but even that is not very good. Yes, I guess it had some discussion, but it never really topped anything, at least not that I could find. None of the Bouncer cards have any synergy with each other or other cards in the game. There's pretty much no reason to ever run a Bouncer deck, even if you were trying to just build a fun casual deck, because the cards just don't work together. The closest thing that they have to synergy is that 2 of them are level 6 and they're trying to make a rank 6 monster. Maybe like one spell that could summon 2 from the deck or even 2 from the graveyard would have tied this deck together at least a little bit, but as it stands right now, this deck is pretty much completely forgotten because all of the cards are total garbage except for their really crazy good Photon Strike Bouncer boss monster. Please remember to write in the comment section below if you knew about any of these cards besides Photon Strike Bouncer. I think there'll be some people out there that know of Photon Strike Bouncer without realizing it was part of a bigger archetype besides photons. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.